So, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. Oh, hi everybody! Merry Christmas! I've just finished doing one of my favourite Yuletide traditions, rereading Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, a tale so timeless and beloved by many that I don't really need to explain to you what the story's about because, well, you already know A Christmas Carol. Anyone who's anyone knows that no other story, save possibly that of the Nativity, reflects the most wonderful time of the year more than Dickens' immortal novella, which tells us how even the most ungenerous souls are capable of redemption, and that despite the bleakest of times, hope still lies around the corner, all while delivering a spectacular FU to the Victorian upper class's treatment of poverty at the time. Because nothing says classic Christmas story for all the family like smashing the system. But in a happy, jolly sort of way. From musicals to Muppets, from Doctor Who to creepy CGI Jim Carrey, there have been so many different adaptations of A Christmas Carol, each of them retelling the story in their own unique way, but still sticking to the basic message of the original in such a way that it's impossible not to love them. Nearly impossible, that is. Yes, Virginia, there is a bad adaptation of A Christmas Carol, in the sense that it totally fails to actually adapt the story so claimed to be paying homage to, all while doing an even poorer job of trying to tell its own gruesome tale of monstrous massacres, time travel, and horrendous self-referential humour. And it heeds to the name of I Am Scrooge by Adam Roberts. Do you like A Christmas Carol? Do you like zombies? Well, thanks to this feeble attempt to jump aboard the thankfully short-lived classic literature but with monsters bandwagon, you'll hate both. Oh yeah, remember when that genre was a thing? Well, that's basically what I Am Scrooge is. Just another brick in the wall made out of an already oversaturated market of supernatural parodies. Only with that being even the slightest bit funny or entertaining whatsoever, and filled with more cynicism and cruelty than Scrooge himself. They say that imitation is the highest form of flattery, but an imitation such as this better die quickly so it can decrease the surplus population of already shitty media in the world. This is Poindexta, and this is I Am Scrooge. Just like the original Christmas Carol, with a preface from the author, which sets the tone for things to come. I have endeavoured in this zombic little book to decapitate the zombie of an idea, which I trust shall devour my readers' brains and pursue them shudderingly yet persistently along the street. You know, I have the sneakiest suspicion that this story has zombies in it. Just a hunch. Okay, so how does this story begin for real? With Marley being dead, to begin with. So nothing new there. Except for the part where his corpse comes back to life as a zombie and starts attacking the clergyman, the clerk, and the undertaker. The churchman's nose was bulbous and red, a fleshy appendage, but Marley bit into it as eagerly as if it had been a ripe strawberry. Marley's teeth tore away the flesh of the face and reached the skull beneath it, uncovering those two gaps in the bone shaped like teardrops that underlined the nose. Marley bit hard and cracked through to the marrow, so violently indeed that one of his yellow front teeth broke away and lodged into the corner of the clergyman's eye socket. But he had reached what he sought, the soft brain matter. Jingle bells, bloody skulls, the scene's gory as fuck. Not in a cool child's play or Krampus way, it's just pretentious schlock. Oh well, let's hope that Scrooge's introduction is less audacious and unbearable. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, and foggy too, a strange brown miasma that smelled of foulness. Scrooge could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warn them. And Scrooge wheezed too, for who could breathe properly in so foul a reek? As the night began to freeze, and he was a right wheezer, and he went by the name of Ebenezer Scrooge. What the hell? Why did that last sentence rhyme? Is that supposed to be like a reference to something I'm missing out on, or is it just this book's attempt at humour? If it's the latter, then it's not working. People said that he was as tight-fisted as a hand at the gravestone, Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old miser. That's what they said. Hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. Hurtful stuff, really. Hashtag not all Scrooges. People said that Scrooge's heart was 3 sizes too small. Too small? That's not Dr. Seuss, you moron! Find one classic Christmas story to ruin and stick with it. And I'm not kidding when I say that this book ruins A Christmas Carol. They can't even get the story structure right because we immediately focus on Scrooge's tragic past, despite it being too early in the tale. Oh, and get this, the reason he grew more closed off and cynical as he got older wasn't because of his obsession with money, but because when he was 9 years old, he was attacked by a creepy old man in the graveyard while walking back home on Christmas Eve night. He had seized a young boy, shaken him, shouted in his face, and then, worst of all, stabbed him in the arm with a thin blade. The physical wound was superficial, and in truth little more than a scratch that healed in a few days, but the wound to young Scrooge's self-assurance, to his mind, was much deeper. The shock scared the lad half to death, and sufficiently out of his wits that, when he came back to them, he discovered he had lost his former blitheness. Fellow feeling was replaced now by caution and suspicion. From that day, and because of that attack, he had grown increasingly sour and reclusive with each passing year. So let me get this straight. Scrooge was attacked by a zombie as a child, and that's the reason why he hates Christmas now? Wow, way to completely miss the point of the original story book. And by the way, if you're going to make Scrooge sympathetic now, it'll completely ruin the emotional impact of his redemption later on. But even though this book can't get its characters right, it's got Dickens' famously illustrative writing style down to a T. More or less. Something was amiss in London town, and its inhabitants slunk from the shadows and whispered to one another that monstrous things were lurking in the East End. Fear stalked the city like a giant, stalk. Oh, how cute. The narrator doesn't know how to describe shit. Where's my money back? I demand a proper storyteller. We see Scrooge working in his counting house late at night on Christmas Eve, along with his assistant Terence Cratchit. Not Bob Cratchit? Why did you change his name? Anyway, Terence Cratchit, who is in a fearful mood. Rumours, sir. Bad intimations. Some malign evil is seeping through the foggy streets this very night, sir. Bah, coughed Scrooge, for the fog got in his throat and agitated a slight tracheal infection from which he suffered. But although his reputation was one of utter inhumanity, he wasn't such a sour old puss. He even felt a certain sympathy for his trembling clerk. He pondered aloud. Then an objection occurred to him, but he started to say, before another cough caught him in his gullet. Really, Book? You're trying to make a joke out of the bar humbug line? Really? Well, as long as you only do it once. I'll confess it, sir. I'm frightened to walk home tonight. You could take a bar. Scrooge coughed. Buggy? Oh, you mean making Scrooge say something that kinda sounds like bar humbug wasn't funny the first time? Then why the hell did you do it again? Scrooge's nephew Fred then turns up, wishing his uncle a scary Christmas. Yes, that's an actual line, and confirms Cratchit's observation that death is in the air when he reveals to them that Marley has passed away. Wait a minute. At the start of A Christmas Carol, Marley had already been dead for 7 years. This story can't even get basic continuity right. Why on earth? Oh, if Marley dies this year, that means he can turn into a zombie immediately afterwards, thus kick-starting this whole dumb plot. Because of course. Scrooge turns down his nephew's offer for a ride home in his carriage, who responds by telling him that he prays the horror stalking the city spares him this Yuletide. A sperry Christmas to you too, Scrooge retorted. That wasn't even a joke. That was just a shitty rhyme. You're not even trying out, are you? Scrooge finishes work for the evening and heads off on his way home, but all of a sudden a mysterious stranger stops him in his steps, who warns him to beware of Marley and, to be properly prepared. Pick up a poker. Hey, any British people out there remember those pick up a penguin adverts? That's the reference. 'Cause those adverts were things that existed. Please laugh. Scrooge dismisses the stranger's warning as insane ramblings and continues to make his way back home. He arrives at his chambers and settles down for the night, and all seems peaceful until the church clock outside begins to chime, and a ghostly voice calls Scrooge's name. Nonsense, said Scrooge. But it was not nonsense. It was indeed non-nonsense. It was, I mean to say, the opposite of nonsense, in that it was deadly serious. Unnonsense. It was sense, is what I think is what I'm trying to say there, with the whole not nonsense thing. Got a bit tangled up there, but you see what I mean.
Get on with it!
But then something starts thumping at the door from the outside, and Scrooge goes off to investigate, arming himself with a small pistol, which isn't enough to stop the aforementioned something from splitting the wood of the door with their fist and revealing themselves to be a face that Scrooge recognised at once, and the slavering mouth expanded its foul repertoire. Here's Molly. Stephen King is scarier than you. Then again, I do grow fearful every time I turn these pages, but for slightly different reasons. Scrooge tries shooting the zombie Marley, but that doesn't stop him from attempting to eat his brains while ignoring Scrooge's own protestations because of his obvious brainlessness. Why attack me, Nathan? 1, nice comma placement there, and 2, Nathan Marley, not Jacob. Why does this book keep making so many changes? It's just ridiculous and jarring. Also, this whole thing really begs the question, why would you add zombies in this story when it already has ghosts? I mean, aside from zombies being marketable and all, but come on, A Christmas Carol is a ghost story. Ain't that supernatural enough for you? You really gotta add zombies as well? Are zombies that fucking necessary? Really? Anyway, a lengthy struggle ensues between man and monster, but Marley is eventually defeated after the hook of Scrooge's strongbox gets caught on its backbone and pulls out his spine and brain. Scrooge beats what little remains of the zombie with a poker while delivering this Ash Williams-worthy sinner. "'Tis the season!" Scrooge gasped, exhausted by the effort, yet with a shuddery sort of triumph flaring inside him. "To thee, Berry!" Ungroovy. Scrooge has a difficult time getting to sleep following the night's shocking turn of events, by the bell outside chiming 3 times, then mysteriously stopping. But before we get to see the first spirit, we get a graphic description of Scrooge pissing himself. Yeah, really. It took half a minute to decant the contents of his bladder into the pot. The heat of this fluid in the cold air of the midnight winter room generated billows of steam. It poured in folds and clouds, granulated white, and coiled about Scrooge's ankles. You know, I was going to make a joke about how this book keeps pissing on the legacy of A Christmas Carol, but now it's literally doing it for me. God, my own existence feels so unnecessary. But all of a sudden, the billows of steam from his now-filled chamber pot rise in the air and begin to surround the bedroom in a whirlpool of cloud, before taking the form of the first spirit. After noticing the remains of the zombie on the floor, the spirit congratulates Scrooge for, quote-unquote, deactivating it so easily, and goes into some detailed exposition on what zombies are. Emphasis on detailed. He literally explains the definition of the word zombie, down to what Greek terms it originated from, like a walking, talking Wikipedia page. Because that sort of thing is totally interesting to the average reader and doesn't condescend them the slightest. And after that, he starts talking about how the reason ghosts are transparent is because they use it as a natural means of disguise. We are timid beings. Why do you think we appear so infrequently? And we have good reason to be timid. Our transparency is camouflage, for there are entities in the world that seek to devour us. Wow, Spirit, that's so fascinating. I never fucking asked. Understand this about zombies. They feed upon mind. They devour mentition itself. Mentition? That's a legal term which refers to whenever someone is lying. Author, did you legitimately think that mentition had something to do with mental, hence the whole discussion of mind? Oh my God, I feel so embarrassed for you. There are 3 of us, 3 brothers if you like, said the spirit. Past, present and future. And which one are you? The past? Scrooge asked, but the spirit shook its head. The past is dead, he said. The past is necessarily dead, said the spirit. Life is volition and change and potential. The past has none of that. It is a child's observation to say as much, but the present is alive, and the present holds hands with the future. Will, change, potential. So you are the present. I am. Christmas present. I would have thought past, present and future would have been a more logical progression. I agree, Scrooge, but clearly this book doesn't follow any logical progression. I have been the loneliest, most unhappy individual in this entire city. People call me a miser, make jokes behind my back. Nobody comprehends my loneliness. Tush, said the spirit. How can you say you are lonely? Let me take you by the hand, Scrooge, and show you all the streets of London, Scrooge. I will show you something that will make you change your Scrooge. Your mind, rather. Streets of London. That's a song. The Ghost of Christmas Present just said the lyrics to a song. That's the joke. Everybody laugh the joke. Everybody laugh at this damn joke. So Scrooge and the spirit join hands and fly out of the window. First stop is this pub filled with happy, drunken revellers. Beer, 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 brains. So let's have a quick tally, said the black-bearded fellow. That's 6 beers and 1. Wait a sec. What was that last one again? Instead of answering his question with words, the newcomer lunged forward and grabbed the bearded man's ears with his hand. The bearded fellow struggled, feebly at first, but then as the agony intensified to the point where it overwhelmed the analgesic sluggishness of the alcohol in the man's bloodstream with a desperate, writhing, horrible vigour. But although his legs thrashed and his heels clattered on the paving stones, he could not break free from the zombie's grip. So here it is, Merry Christmas, everybody's gonna die. For the rest of this book, you're gonna scream out, why? Yep, I hope you like repetitive scenes featuring zombies murdering people, described in horrifically bloody detail, and featuring a dash of strangely uncharacteristic nihilism for a book based off A Christmas Carol, all which ultimately serve no purpose except to remind the reader that this is indeed a zombie story. Because that is basically I Am Scrooge from here on out. Remember when I said that this story doesn't follow a coherent narrative? I was lying. For you see, pretty much every other scene in this book can be summed up with the following. Dumb parody of either A Christmas Carol or Victorian England in general. Suddenly zombies. Don't believe me? Just listen. Scrooge saw a poulterer carrying 2 huge turkeys, recently killed and as yet unplucked, from his cart over to his stall. These 2 are prize winners, he called to his colleagues. Biggest of the flock, a guinea each. They were sickening, ready to pop their clogs, returned another trader. I saw them on the cart. You've got rotten poultry there. Nothing the customers need to know. I've run their necks now, said the first. Dumb parody of Victorian times. As George lifted the 2 birds, one in each hand, ready to throttle them a second time, they acted in unison, flapping their wings furiously and flurrying forwards. Each beak found an eye. George screamed, let go his grip, and instead tried to use his hands to bat the creatures away. But they beat their wings furiously and paddled their feet upon the man's chest, and in a twinkling they'd each pecked out a jellied eyeball. Suddenly zombies. Zombie turkeys in this case. Because whenever I think of A Christmas Carol, all I can think about is how this whole story would have been a million times better if it had zombie turkeys in it. To hell with heart-touching optimism or grave sincerity. Undead monsters are cool and popular, which makes them better by default. Jesus Christ, what other ridiculous pandering are we gonna get? Scrooge made out one man, better dressed than you might expect to find in Whitechapel, scurrying along the road. He was wearing a black frock coat and hat, and carrying a little black bag. A doctor, Scrooge bethought himself. A hurrying figure ducked into an alley and came to a halt in front of a young woman standing at the corner. From her apparel, the nature of her patched threadbare dress, the amount of legs she displayed, quite as much as the fact of her waiting at a street corner in this manner, it was clear enough what her occupation was. His arm darted out with a practised motion, the scalpel intersected the woman's throat and came back into the light, dark with blood. "Ha-ha!" growled the man. "Behold, I am no ordinary man, for I am Jack! Jack the woman's face loomed forward into the light, and the fellow's voice shifted abruptly in tone from gloat to shriek. "Ruddy Nora!" Yep, Jack the Ripper's in this book now. Jack the Ripper and A Christmas Carol, the 2 go together like dog shit and mustard. And then he gets killed by a pair of zombie prostitutes. Because Christmas, I guess. Anyway, let's go to the Tower of London and see how Her Majesty is dealing with all these zombie attacks. Your subjects are being murdered and devoured all round us. Most unfortunate. Monsters that devour the living flesh, gasped the royal servant. They are being called zombies. Devils possess them, use them for evil. The Queen, still sitting, stiffened her spine. We, she said firmly, are not zom-used. Get it? Suddenly Suddenly, a zombie version of John Brown shows up and starts killing people, although Queen Victoria seems oddly cool with this. A moment before John Brown reached the settee, Queen Victoria, displaying a nimbleness and rapidity surprised in one of her girth and age, hopped to her feet. As Brown stretched his neck forward and opened his mouth to bite into her, Her Majesty caught up the imperial crown, raised it swiftly in both hands, and brought it hard down upon Brown's dolichocephalic head. "You disappoint me much, Gilly. Silly of you to act so willy-nilly," she said in a loud voice. "Again with the goddamn rhymes. How is rhyming funny? What's the joke? Just because he made a bunch of words sound the same doesn't automatically equal comedy. What kind of imbecile could possibly laugh at the so-called humour in this book?" I stand corrected. The spirit then takes Scrooge to his nephew's house, where him and his family have locked themselves indoors because of the whole zombie apocalypse thing, although Fred remains an eternal optimist. These monsters may be roaming outside, but we are safe within our house, and this, our home, is as good as a castle. The doors are locked and bolted, the windows secure. Best of all, we have all the supplies and necessities to last a lengthy siege, all the food and drink for a hearty Christmas season. And once we run out of food, there's always the cyanide pills. Women and children first. Hey, judging by this book's sense of humour, would you really be surprised? Wife, children, the cook is frying up some brains. Calf brains, I dare say, and I've asked her to do some mushrooms and eggs as well. The cook's a zombie, isn't she? She said brains because she's a zombie. The cook stood in the doorway, blood smeared across her three chins. She was holding the bleeding, severed arm of the under-butler, still in its olive-green livery and dripping red from its ragged end. Well, his family's dead. Next! Finally, Scrooge and the spirit pay a visit to the Cratchit household, but there's seemingly no one in sight except for Tiny Tim, who, according to the narrator, isn't actually tiny at all. Oh, and he can see Scrooge now, I guess. It is Christmas Day. You should have come yesterday, or earlier. I do not know what you mean, said Scrooge, although perhaps you seek to rebuke me for my lack of prior charitable activity. It is truly, though not kindly spoken, if so, and all I can say is that in the future I shall make up for what I failed to do in the past. The future, chuckled Tim, the very idea. I assure you, little sir, there is no future. Did you not hear me say you have come too late? You do not remember our conversation in that Antipodean refuge? What is even happening anymore? Of course, you could not come any earlier, said Tim, because you, and he flickered a glance at the ghost, could not manifest on any other day. No more, said the spirit, than you could bring about this destruction on any other day. Wait! So, Tiny Tim brought out the zombies? He's the villain of this story? What? And to add further insult to injury, we see that the other members of the Cratchit family have all been turned into zombies. The spirit and Scrooge make haste almost immediately, as it seems that the ghost of Christmas presents time on Earth is nearly at an end. He tells Scrooge before leaving that he's immune to the zombies and the only one who can stop them, and that the only time to stop them is on Christmas Day this exact year and in this particular city. And then we're introduced to the second spirit, who... Oh dear God. Oi oi, shouted the second spirit. Result! Ow ow ow! Wicked! He's a chav. Yo! He called. Scrooge! Mr. Scrooge! Master Scrooge! Yo the man! Hello, said Scrooge. So my brother took you on the full AAA aerial open-top bus Madgemas tour of the capital, yeah? Am I right? Scrooge blinked, then he blinked again. Christmas press, my bruv, yeah? With the wig and that? Wicked. Wow, a story that wants to lift an important message about the unpleasant treatment of poor people back then, now features a modern-day stereotype of working-class people. Dickens would be so proud of you, I'm sure. Wow, a story that once lived an important message about the unpleasant treatment of poor people back then, now features a modern-day stereotype of lower-class people. Dickens would be so proud. This spirit whisks Scrooge away on another journey, this time of course to the future, where we see that London has been almost entirely taken over by the zombies, and the few survivors left are hiding underground in fear. Among them Fred, who has reluctantly ventured outside in search of food. "It is I, my love, your husband. However horribly this zombie plague has attacked your soul, my darling, you surely cannot have forgotten your husband." "Has," said the zombie uncertainly. "That's right, my sweet. Just so, my love. Do you remember the day we married? That wonderful day in St. Cedric in the cellars? Your dress was as white as your porcelain skin. Hilda, how beautiful you looked." "Well, Fred, she was beautiful once, but she ain't getting any prettier now. Looks aren't everything, I know, but you better get the fuck out of there if you know what's best for you." "You would not devour me, Hilda, my love. You would not devour your husband." "Has..." For a moment, the zombie that had once been Hilda swayed a little, her lips working soundlessly. She gazed down upon the figure before her. Then her mouth opened. "Has..." she groaned. "Brains!" "Hey, I know marriage can kill a man, but this is just ridiculous." The Spirit and Scrooge fly all over England, where it seems that pretty much the whole country is now zombie territory. So much so that Queen Victoria has been forced to hole up inside Dover Castle. And boy has she changed. Inside sat Her Majesty, surrounded by a dozen ferociously armed bodyguards. The months had slimmed her frame down considerably, and as a result, she looked more drawn and tired than the last time Scrooge had seen her. More strikingly, she was wearing not the black dress of fond memory, but an all-leather ensemble. Queen Victoria in a leather catsuit? Who the fuck gets turned on by Queen Victoria in a leather catsuit? Don't answer that, Internet! Scrooge thought of asking the spirit the meaning of this strange garb, but thought better of the impulse, and instead attempted to puzzle it out for himself. Presumably, he thought to himself, it is the better to protect her against a chance of zombie bite. Yeah, because as we all know, tight leather is to zombies what garlic is to vampires. It's just a coincidence that it just so happens to be fetish fuel. Seriously though, Queen Victoria in a catsuit? Why? Anyway, we find out that an airship from France is arriving to escort Victoria out of the mainland for her own safety, but she's unhappy at the thought of leaving behind her subjects while the country remains in the midst of the zombie plague. At this point, a scientist steps forward to announce that they've just discovered a man invulnerable to the zombies who's been surviving on his own in the wilderness for over a year, and that man reveals himself to be Ebenezer Scrooge. "Me," said Scrooge. "Ghost, how can it be?" "You got me, brother, you got me. The lowdown's no showdown. Don't you know? No's a no-no, Mr. Seldom, Sam I am, hooray. This ain't my timeline, Dick. You think I could even exist in this wasteland? How could I've got the wisdom? Ain't no Wandsworth Further Education College of Art, Music and Design in this Versi vice version of events. What? In English, you stereotypical motherfucker. The scientist has presented Scrooge to Her Majesty because he believes that the cure for the plague might lie in his blood cells, but it's not long before the French ambassador arrives to announce that their president has had to postpone their offer of sanctuary as they believe the risk of permitting any immigration at all is too great. Something, cheese-eating surrender monkeys. Zombie time! There was a wrenching, sucking sound, accompanied by the snapping of bones. With a popping sound, his chest literally broke open. Blood sprayed, pieces of bone burst and flew, and a red, glistening, sopping mess emerged, poking itself towards the royal throne. Held in a superhuman grip, the ambassador's still beating heart was forced out of his body towards the Queen. Behind him stood the general, his face now a mask. His white beard waggled and a word emerged. Brains! He released the heart so that it tumbled into the carpet before the royal chair and bit hard into the back of the ambassador's neck. Listen, book, if you want to be some boring old Victorian steampunk zombie dystopia novel, and I'm pretty sure there's enough of those around already, then by all means, be a boring old Victorian steampunk zombie dystopia novel. But for the love of God, don't drag a Christmas Carol into this, especially if you're not going to even try to adapt the original story and reflect all which it represents. Even by lazy cash-in standards, this is just brainless. Pun intended. We then travel even further into the future and we see that the entire coastline has been turned into a great fort to keep the British Isles protected from the zombie invasion, which has since spread to France. Scrooge and his spirit come across a military camp in the middle of the French countryside, where they discover the alternate Scrooge describing one of his escapades to another man. "I came over in a small boat," said Scrooge. "I didn't expect to find the coastal defences in such a state of disrepair. I suppose I planned to try and talk my way through. In the event, that proved unnecessary." "But how did you come across France and evade the zombie population?" "A trick, Dickens, that I picked up in Blighty." Dickens! Okay, look, that's enough. That's a fucking enough. I mean, you've already destroyed the 4 cities, there's nowhere else to go, so you might as well stop right now. Dickens! I was lucky to find a little dog in the field, a bright little thing. I put him in a cage and put the cage on the end of a pole. Then, and this was the tricky part, I found a zombie horse. Since I don't advise you try and saddle such a beast, I recommend finding one already in harness. There are plenty of old army beasts staggering about northern France. Then it's a simple matter of hopping on the fin's back, poking the poke forwards like a knight's lance, such that the cage and its occupant dangles before the horse. It's better than a carrot to a donkey. And the dog? It's about here somewhere. They call it Scroogey too, I understand, on account of its sweet nature. Fuck you! What did you used to be before this catastrophe? I was a writer, a teller of tall tales. Perhaps you've heard of me. I was never a reader of popular fiction, said Scrooge, I regret to say. No matter, if I ever survive these events, I'll have the material for a novel like no other, and no mistake. No, you won't have any material for such a novel, because last time I checked, Charles Dickens was a fantastic and intelligent author who probably had much better things to do with his time than pop off to alternate dimensions to hand around with his own characters in such an incompetent mess of a tale. This parody novel about zombies evading Victorian London is getting a bit too unrealistic for my liking. Anyway, more zombies attack as Spirit and Scrooge decide to get out of there and go even further into the future as they arrive at the far-off year of 1899, in which the zombies have officially taken over the entire planet. Except, that is, for Australia. If this dystopian Australia doesn't come with Tom Hardy all chained up and muzzled, I am personally cancelling Christmas. The pair head inside a large house where a much older Scrooge now resides, and we see him inside a laboratory having a conversation with his assistant about the state of the world. The most we can say is, to the best of our knowledge, the rest of the world has been overrun, but we cannot be certain. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The silence of the telephone lines and the radio waves, said Scrooge, the complete lack of refugees coming to these shores, the impossibility of survival in a zombie-dominated landscape. You survived. I am a special case, Wells, as you know very well indeed. Wells? H.G. Wells is in this book now? Oh, wait, why am I getting angry? Wells, H.G. Wells is in this book now? Because, you know, he was another person from Victorian times, that's another funny little reference. Hey, why am I even getting so angry? Wells is a very common surname, it could be anyone, it's no big deal. Except for the part where he refers to himself as a former writer and announces that he's actually invented the time machine from the story of the same name. Oh, there's a third guy in the room who's been helping them out, named Mr. Tim. First name Nee. And he comes from Thailand. Tiny Tim. The zombies have shown evidence of cognitive development, of rudimentary nature perhaps, but undeniably present. In Europe they learned to explode themselves with grenades and so spread the plague, and in the battles with the Cossacks they learned to set as hack animals upon their foe. Do you remember the dog that savaged the Tsar, and the feral zombie cat who attacked the Russian Queen? There, agreed Wells, was a cat that really was gone. Rah, Rasputin, that's a son who gives a shit. All of a sudden, everybody in the room somehow manages to see the original Scrooge. Tim explains that the reason for this is, well, The reaction of chronotonic cascade synthesis does mean that time particles are spinning across the room. Perhaps that interferes with the loose spectral refraction effect of a time-loosened body, such as this gentleman, sufficiently to render it visible. You fucking translate that. I've already lost the will to live. Wells is the brilliant idea of propelling Scrooge back into the past, along with a small vial of antidote he'd previously been working on, in order to convince his younger self to release all of his funds into developing the science and technologies necessary to mass-produce the zombie cure. But then the ghost of Christmas future, who had fallen asleep a little while ago, suddenly wakes up with a shock after recognising Tim's voice, and yanks Scrooge even further ahead in time. "You are unwell, my friend," said Scrooge, horribly concerned, and bending down to cradle the entity in his arms. "Why did you leave that place so precipitously?" Nah," said the ghost in a distant, feeble voice. "It was Tim. You saw Tim and knew him. Who is he?" "That knee. You saw him, right? He's bad news, blood. He's—" And the ghost stood upright, very straight and tall, and let out a long hissing breath between his teeth. "He's standing right behind you!" yelped Scrooge. "With a knife," confirmed the ghost in a strangulated voice. He fell forward and piled onto the floor in a heap, and lay there motionless. Behind him was Knee Tim, holding in his right hand a red, wet and dripping blade. He just stabbed a ghost? Humans can't stab ghosts, right? So did Tim just have a special knife for killing spirits? Or is he a spirit too? Come to think of it, what was his motivation for killing the spirit in the first place? Why does he even want to bring about the zombie apocalypse? No, really, Scrooge literally asked him that last question, but he just says that he doesn't have enough time to answer it and fucks off in that time machine of his. Also, we discover that the creepy old guy who attacked Ebenezer when he was a kid was actually the old version of Scrooge from before, trying to warn his younger self about the future. Which means that if that Scrooge made it back in time, why didn't the original Scrooge? If the main character Scrooge didn't participate in Wells' time machine experiment, how come it worked for the other Scrooge? Shouldn't it have failed? And why didn't Scrooge notice that the suspicious Asian man helping him out looked an awful lot like the Cratchit's adopted son? Did he grow senile as he became older and forget who Tiny Tim was? Come to think of it, why didn't the original Scrooge get a clue and start suspecting Tiny Tim after the Ghost of Christmas Present accused him of bringing about the destruction earlier on? And why has Tiny Tim's name been changed to a terrible racist pun? Why has Scrooge's backstory been changed so that he's more obviously sympathetic? Why is Jack the Ripper killing people in 1843, the year A Christmas Carol was originally published, and thus presumably the date in which the story takes place, when his murder spree didn't happen until 45 years later? Why is Charles Dickens in his story? Why is H.G. Wells in his story? Why is the Ghost of Christmas Present a chav? Please help! Save me, Krampus! Save me from this terrible, inconsistent book with unfunny jokes and confusing plot holes! This is supposed to be Christmas! Why am I not happy? Why? Oh. So Tim escapes after killing the spirit, leaving Scrooge trapped in a parallel timeline all on his own, and stuck inside an empty house with a horde of zombies outside to boot. But after 3 weeks of despair and hopelessness, he finally gets an unexpected visitor in the form of the third and final spirit, the Ghost of Christmas Past. But didn't the first spirit say that? Wait a minute! You're not dead? The spirit shook his head. Even though you are the Ghost of Christmas Past, I am the Ghost of Christmas Past, forsooth and on. Right, good. Well, thanks for addressing that little continuity error. Is what I would be saying if you actually made an attempt to properly fix this legitimate mistake in the story. My brother's spirits have shown you the horror that begins in London town, and shown you that it sweeps the world across, said the Ghost of Christmas Past. Scrooge put his hands before his face. The visions have changed me utterly, he cried. Never again shall I cut myself off from humanity. I shall be a kind and tender-hearted man, if only I am restored to human society. I swear it. Oh, said the spirit, for we were rather hoping that, you'll pardon me, yes, that you would now annihilate Tiny Tim. Scrooge thought about this. Annihilate, he said. Kill, murder, bash his head through, Do him in. Ugh, I'm pretty sure that old Honey Nut Cheerios commercial was a more faithful retelling of A Christmas Carol than this. Then again, I wouldn't be surprised if a talking bee showed up in his book, 'cause, you know, pop culture reference. You want my first act in my newfound goodness of heart to be the cold-blooded murder of a child? No, child, his frame is small, skin smooth, because of scientific tweaking of the bodily expression of his genes. Only technology makes him seem young.
That explains everything!
It's at this point in the story that we finally get at least one major question answered. Why all the zombies are attacking everyone on Christmas Day? They came before as plagues upon your world, before your time. Yet the historical record, Scrooge faltered. I mean, there is no mention it happened still, although it was contained. It scarred mankind's collective consciousness too deep to be recalled as history. It is remembered now only as myth, but myth is true remembrance. Every year you reenact the story yet again, though you've forgotten quite the origin of all your Christmas rituals and rites. Scrooge's mind seemed to gape. You are talking about Christmas? Oh no. Oh no, I don't like where this is going. The word itself contains the memory of a time when graves spat horrors on the world, when zombies swarmed the land, and mankind strove and fought to crush the mass of zombie kind. Crush some mass, gasped Scrooge. Across the centuries, agreed the spirit, the word had been worn smooth in use, sea smoothed as pebbles are. Christmas? Christmas. You know, story, it's not too late to back down. If you wanted to, you could stop all of this right now. You could be just like Ebenezer Scrooge and change your ways in the nick of time instead of, I don't know, retconning the birth of Jesus Christ. Fir trees from northern European woods? What does such foliage have to do with Christ? Fluted the ghost. Presents wrapped in boxes? Christmas puds? What relevance do these have for the biblical New Testament account? Scrooge shook his head. I do not know, he answered. The reasons here are obvious enough, said the spirit. For what's a Christmas tree, in sooth, if not a living being wrenched up from its soil, roots torn and broken, and yet still alive? A tree that's forced to carry on inside a deathly half-life for 12 Christmas days? Well, when you put it like that, you sound like a depressing killjoy. Seriously, dude, who pissed in your eggnog? And what of giving presents? What is that? It is surely simple gift-giving, said Scrooge. Why is another explanation needful? But think of this, for it has never been tradition that these gifts are simply given, said the spirit, the light flaring white from his eyes and mouth, the very hairs on its head conducting the light along its filaments and passing along the top of his head like sunlight over a cornfield. Rather, each present must first be interred, put in a box, a model coffin, wrapped as in a shroud, and then symbolically buried to the base of the Christmas tree. Each gift is like a corpse, dead in the ground, until comes Christmas morning, when the dead, unburied, all come lumbering back to life. They're just presents! We give them to people because we care about them. Oh look, my mug is almost empty. I guess it represents the hollow skull of a human corpse after a zombie ate the brain inside. See, that's what you sound like. The spirit continues blabbering on about how all of our Christmas time traditions were in fact allegories for a past zombie apocalypse which totally happened, guys. Not only does he compare stockings to severed feet and Christmas puddings to brains, but he also decides to change the meaning of Christmas carols. Those leaping lords, those drummers flailing arms, the Christmas landscape populated with these clustered ranks of twitching, jerking folk. What other scene do you think it describes? Zombies, gasped Scrooge. Zombies. The 12 Days of Christmas is about zombies. Book. Why? Just why? What are you trying to prove with all of this? How on earth is this blasphemous, pessimistic, lazy load of trite supposed to be even the slightest bit entertaining? I mean, it's bad enough that you messed up an iconic story, you took a shit all over its plot, and you failed to understand what made this timeless tale of redemption so beloved, but now you're quite literally ruining Christmas? Oh, who am I kidding? I'm sure that by the rules of this story's universe, all this morbid shit about zombies and dead trees and brains and corpses and whatever is a complete improvement over the real meanings of all these holiday traditions. Because God forbid people be happy happy. God forbid people want to show their thanks and pay respect to the ones they love this time of year, to their family, to their friends, to their religion, to humanity in general. God fucking forbid that for one day, one measly little day, a vast proportion of the human population decides to come together, forget about all the bad things in life, and focus on spreading love and peace and kindness and goodwill towards everyone. Not because of some long-forgotten zombie apocalypse, but because it's a nice thing to do. And by the way, I don't care that this is supposed to be a parody novel, because it's not a very good parody. I mean, it's not even very Christmassy either. This is just a tedious, heartless waste of bookshelf space that contributes nothing to the world and only exists because, everyone likes zombies. We should take a classic story and turn it into a zombie book. Fuck you! That's not creative. That's not going to have a lasting emotional impact on anyone. People deserve better. They deserve important stories filled with great, intelligent messages that doesn't look down on them, that doesn't patronise them. And I know, yes I know, that 1,000 years from now, 1,000 motherfucking years from now, people are going to still think about Christmas Carol than they ever will you, because someone out there many, many years ago decided to write a story that said something, that delivered an important message, and someone else in another time period didn't. Bah humbug. So the spirit takes Scrooge all the way back to the very beginning of the story on Christmas Eve night and warns him to act fast because time is running short. Scrooge bumps into his past self and attempts to warn him about everything yet to come, but while doing so accidentally becomes the weird stranger that the old Scrooge shooed off from earlier in the book. At this point, I don't even care about continuity. This story can just die. Scrooge runs all the way to the Cratchits' home and just barely manages to get there a few minutes before midnight. Upon entering their household, however, he has a brief moment of doubt and starts to question whether murdering the youngest member of their small yet humble family is really the right thing to do. For about 2 seconds before confronting Tim anyway. "You embodiment of evil!" cried Scrooge. "I'm sorry, Mr. Scrooge," Cratchit put in. "You may be my employer, but you're a guest in my house, and you'll have to be more civil than that." Scrooge looked into the man's face. It was worn with exhaustion and bore the unmistakable signs of sickness. Sweat stood upon his brow. "You are ill, sir," said Scrooge, recoiling a little. "There is some low fever in the house," conceded Cratchit. "We all have it, but it is not serious, a mere sniffle, really, no more than a little sinus pain and a slightly runny nose." He smiled at Scrooge weakly. Then he fell forward to land, face downwards on the parlour floor. Scrooge bent down. "Cratchit, what's wrong?" But Terence Cratchit was dead. "Uh-oh." "Mrs. Cratchit," said Scrooge, "I regret to inform you that—" But before he could finish the sentence, Mrs. Cratchit pitched forward out of her chair and fell hard as a dropped sack of grain upon the tiles of the parlour floor. She lay beside her husband, unbreathing. Well, now this just makes me wish George R. R. Martin was writing this book. He's the only author I trust to kill off a bunch of iconic characters without making me want to wring his neck. After the Cratchit children enter the room, and immediately drop dead too, Tim reveals to Scrooge his true evil self and explains that while on his way to fuck things up in the past, the time machine he was travelling in exploded and left him seriously injured upon his arrival in London a few years ago. Fortunately for him, the kind Cratchit family saw his plight and, mistaking him for an orphan boy, took him in as one of their own. But little did they realise that for the last couple of years he'd been secretly working on a brand new distillation of the original zombie plague, more powerful and dangerous than the last. Do you still not understand? Whence comes the zombie plague? Did your spirit friends not explain? They told me that Christmas Day possesses some potency, that the plague cannot be loosed upon any other day. And did you think to wonder why? The ghost of Christmas past said that our Christmas rituals memorialised a previous outbreak of the plague. Not an outbreak, said Tim, sitting forward in his miniature chair, his eyes bright. The outbreak, the first Christmas. Christ was no zombie. His coming brought life into the world, but Ebenezer Scrooge, you know that the world exists in a balance, that nothing is given without something being taken away, that everything has its cost, equal and opposite. When life came into the world, there was a cost. That cost was death.
That doesn't make sense.
There is the death at the end of life, the death of fullness as natural's winter coming after summer. But then there is another form of death, a hungry death, a death that walks as a beast of prey, on two legs, hungry to devour life at its very source. Christ's coming because it focused a new point of life, eternal life, into the world, upset the equilibrium of things. And so at that exact moment there came into being a point of death, eternal death. It's like listening to the drunken ramblings of Richard Dawkins, minus the parts where I lose my faith in humanity. For the most part. But then the cathedral bells in the distance start chiming for Christmas Day, and like any good villain, Tim starts explaining his evil plans and gloating about his impending moment of victory rather than actually looking out for his own head. Literally. I was able to keep you talking, said Tim delightedly, talking and listening, to delay you until Christmas Day begins. You fool. You should have struck when you had the chance. It's too late now. Your tender little conscience has doomed all your kind. Humanity will be consumed by the zombie plague. My victory is complete. Scrooge had struck him on the top of the head with the crutch. Yay! Ebenezer Scrooge did it! He saved the day. He killed a man. A boy man. It's never really explained what the deal was with Tiny Tim, but a human being nevertheless. Oh, don't worry. He balances out his act of cold-blooded homicide by also attacking the now zombified Cratchit family and setting their wooden house on fire. And thus our wonderful Yuletide tale ends with Scrooge realising he has to warn the rest of London about the impending zombie outbreak, which should hopefully be a lot easier to stop with Tim no longer around to control them. People of London, Scrooge bellowed into the night sky, heed me! We are under attack from a terrible foe, but I have the knowledge to save us. Let us remember the true meaning of Christmas and crush the zombies' mass. To you all I say, go bash 'em, every zomb! Scrooge was immediately arrested and charged for disturbing the peace and spent the last few years of his life in Bedlam while the rest of the world fell victim to the zombie apocalypse once more, and everyone died happily ever after. The end. That was I Am Scrooge, and that was a load of ho-ho horse shit. Now, let me get one thing clear. Changing the plot of A Christmas Carol to include zombies probably isn't the worst idea in the world. In fact, there's already a series of comics with the exact same concept, which apparently isn't that bad. But the decisions that Adam Roberts made while writing this parody are questionable at best and confusing at worst. The traditional narrative structure of the original tale gets thrown out the window very early on, and the personalities of the iconic characters are completely butchered to fit in with the author's own reimagining of A Christmas Carol as a bleak, cynical world in which a zombie outbreak could easily happen overnight and all of humanity would be doomed. This results in a baffling, non-linear plot that bores the reader with a fatal combination of bad attempts at comedy in the form of easy puns and pop culture references, with lengthy sections of needlessly detailed exposition about some of the more supernatural elements in the story, which only raise more questions than solve them. But my biggest gripe with I Am Scrooge is of how boring it is, not just for reasons I previously mentioned, but how depressingly, mind-crushingly boring the whole thing was in general. I found this book annoying from the very first line, but as it went on, my mere annoyance turned into a genuine blood-boiling rage over its sheer existence. The fact that someone out there took one look at Charles Dickens' heartfelt classic and decided to rewrite the entire thing just to pander to a certain popular niche while making a quick buck. I'm sure that Adam Roberts is a talented author, he's certainly a successful one, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to forgive him quite yet for what he did to something so special. Anyway, that's enough of me being angry. That's enough of anyone being angry this year. Today is Christmas Day, and as we celebrate this wonderful occasion, let's take a moment to reflect on what's good. Let's continue to remind ourselves of the things that bring us joy and love for all eternity, rather than the things that will only fill us with a temporary hatred. After all, if there's anything we can learn from Ebenezer Scrooge, the real Ebenezer Scrooge, it's that happiness you can bring onto others is worth more than gold, and it's never too late to have a change of heart. This is Poindexta, wishing you all a very happy holidays.
With a thankful heart, with an endless joy, with a growing family, every girl and boy will be nephew and niece to me. Nephew and niece to me. We'll bring love, hope, and peace to me.
Love, hope, and peace to me.
Yes, and every night will end, and every day will start with a grateful prayer and a thankful heart.